Hi everyone. Today we're doing our morning live here in Australia for me. And on the live times, tell me where you are because I'm still figuring out what will be the best times for me here. So then people in other countries, in other time schedules can also come in and we can enjoy this time together. For today, I'm going to be answering questions. And if you want to send a question as well, please, there's a little tab with questions and you can just send that through. So let's start here. What is the biggest myth people believe about needing a will or proper training to make good ceramics? So the wheel is a very well-known technique or way of working with ceramics. Is how I started as well, and is a really interesting practice because it really requires you to be in total presence for every movement. Because as soon as you kind of like think about something else or get out of your mind a little bit, you just do something wrong with the wheel. So it's really interesting because it was for me a very special start, and I thought that wheel would be my thing. And I spent like all the beginning of my journey on the wheel until I got to a point that I was like, oh, I actually would like to do that more often than what I'm doing, which was once or twice a week in a ceramic studio with the wheel and a teacher. And then the lady from the ceramic supply said, why you don't get something, do some hand building at home? I was like, oh, no, hand building. And she's like, no, just try a different type of clay and all of that. I was like, okay, sweet. And then I started doing hand building at home. And hand building at that time was really, really interesting because there are things as well that you can do on the wheel, but it's quite challenging to do as a beginner. For instance, to make plates. It's way easier to create bowls or cups on the wheel as a beginner than to create plates. But as a beginner with hand building, creating plates is actually quite easy if you mainly if you're using a more groggy clay. So I think that there's a bit of a misunderstanding there. Both paths are great. They can coexist as well, really, really well. And you learn from one method and another method. In terms of training, for both, you can definitely start on your own and just find your way. But I do find that as a beginner, when you have someone to walk you through, when you watch how people create, it's really, really important because what happened for me personally, I signed up for a beginner's course on the wheel and got obsessed. So I started watching videos and other tutorials and learning online too, in conjunction with having a physical practice. And I think that was really, really powerful because I believe that I absorb some techniques and some movements with my hands that I never seen in real life. And sometimes I caught myself doing things. I was like, oh, wow, my teacher didn't tell me that. Where, how did I create? And then later I was like, oh, actually, it's just that I watched videos, so many of them, that I do not remember which video actually was, but that's where the technique came from. So there's no right or wrong path. It's just really a matter of finding our way. And I think allowing ourselves to be beginners, allowing our work to really be from someone that's just starting with that practice is a big part of keeping on the journey and moving forward with your practice. Let's see what else we have here. Okay. What was the first piece that felt like you, not an imitation or someone else's style? Okay, so when I started again on the wheel, all the pieces were very average. Even though it did feel like I was a natural, and I heard that from my teacher. She's like, "Oh wow, have you done that before?" When I look now, I was like, "Oh wow, they were pretty bumpy and like a few little bowls." I was like, oh yeah, that's taking shape. But because my sense of aesthetic now and how particular I am about angles, curves, and all of that, I can see that wasn't any masterpiece coming out in my first pieces, but that's the thing that happened with hand building. So I got this first block of clay that I took home to try some hand building, to get more time with clay. It was a very groggy clay. And I decided to make two cups, a little espresso cup and a little cappuccino cup, let's say, a little bigger coffee cup. And then I was like, okay, I pinched them open and felt like they were needing a handle. And then I did this little handle that was just a little thing popping out like that. And they dried slowly. They looked cool, but I didn't even give much attention to them or thought that they were like amazing by then. And then it happened that I was working on a studio and they allow me to fire my work in there. So in the beginning of my journey, I worked for free for many people or for very little money in different ceramic studios in order to learn and to be there and to see what they do. And so we fired these first pieces. And then when I went to glaze them, I just didn't know anything about anything. I just picked a glaze that was there that sounded cool. And I've seen how it looked when fired. And anyway, this piece got fired. And when I picked it up, I was like, wow, did I make that? I have talent. There is something to that. So those two pieces, that little, I'll tell more details about it, but that little coffee cup and that little bigger cup, when I looked at them and when I held them in my hands, I was like, wow, that was the first piece that I made completely out of my own, using my limitations in my favor rather than fighting against them. That was the first piece that I was like, oh wow. I remember that the day that I got those pieces, I got to meet with some friends. It was kind of a little party hangout. And I was telling them super excited about it. It was like, oh, where is it? I was like, okay, I'll get out, I'll go to my car and I'll pick it up to show you. I was so proud of those pieces because they looked so beautiful. It was a dark, um, like a brown clay with lots of grog, and then was a kind of blue, purplish with a bit of white glaze. I still have one of those cups. It's all chipped already, but it's a cup that's really important to me. And it was interesting because I had so very little experience that that little cup I told you was my um, espresso cup because I like to drink double espressos sometimes, became such a little cup because it shrunk so much that became more like a kid's tea set kind of cup. But that wasn't a problem. I just thought, okay, next time I need to make my pieces bigger in order to have a cup that really feels like is a double espresso cup. But that was when hand building really, like, my eyes open up for the possibilities of hand building, that I actually could do work at my place. I didn't need to like drive 1 hour to go to the studio, and then later I could just drive my finished pieces to the studio. So yeah, wasn't a copy because back then the place that I was living, I was outside, set up my little table in the garden and started making, and yeah, it was really cool. Like, and then from there, which is really interesting, I was like, oh, I'll make myself some plates. I always wanted to making myself some plates because I really love cooking and always felt like commercial plates weren't quite the thing. So then I started making some plates, and I bought these kind of plate molds, these plaster molds. Um, and then as I'm making these plates, I went talking with, I used to work in a cafe in a really nice restaurant here, used to called Harvest. And I went talking with my co-workers there, which were chefs and people from the hospitality side of things. And I'm like, oh, I'm super excited. I'm making these plates. They're looking great. And they're like, oh, bring it over. Show us when it's ready. So I did. once I fired the plates and glazed, and I always had a more, say, minimalist preference. So I wanted to make them in white. So anyway, I went there and I made my first plate. It was a kind of side plate, and I showed them, and the chef was like, "Oh wow, can you please make some for us?" I was like, "Oh what? Really? How many?" He's like, "I don't know, like 20." I was like, "Okay." So that was my first official order, like first time that I got commissioned to make something. So then I did, super excited, made way more than 20 because I know that like you never really know how many gonna survive. Anyway, was again this darker, that I actually wasn't the darker clay body, it was a speckled kind of cream clay body. So I did with that one, and then I glazed in white. So I just opened them up. They had a little lift because I used this plaster plate bat, let's say, to put them on. And because I didn't have many tools, I got like a muslin cloth to be something that would help me to move my pieces and to create a little bit of pattern that looked nice, didn't look just like a back of a canvas kind of pattern. So the way that I would put the mesh, because it was very thin, the cloth, it would create a really nice organic pattern. And I just pinched the sides, and then perfect fire the first time. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna make my own white glaze, right? Like, and then I bought the ingredients, made my own white glaze, and fired them. And then they came out all looking completely different. I'm not sure exactly what happened. If my glaze split, if my mixture wasn't right, but each plate came completely different. Like there was parts of the glaze that were clear, parts of the glaze that were white. Anyway, was very, even though they had all the same shape, they were all quite one of a kind. And then I was like, oh fuck, kind of didn't really work out as I wanted. And then I told the chef, I was like, oh sorry, I was hoping to have them ready for you, but I'm gonna need to remake them because they look all very different and I'm not sure. He's like, no, bring them, let me see anyway. I was like, okay. So I got him the plates. And he's like, I love them. They absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. Look at them. And he's looking at the plates. I was like, oh, okay, sure. He's like, yeah. And then, so I was like, okay, somehow it worked out. Maybe not being perfect because they were still functional, they were fully glazed, wasn't that the glaze crawled or anything, can be a good thing as well. And then I was like, okay, perfect. And then I sent them the invoice and got my first official payment for my work. And then in this meantime, they did a photo shoot and I got to see my piece, the first commissions, photographed with a beautiful dessert on top. I was like, oh, wow, it was so fulfilling for me. So yeah, I think like finding my style was a matter of really understanding at that time and still what are my limitations, what can I do, what can I cannot do, and work with what I have, work with what I can do, and then everything just kind of flows, you know. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Uh, okay, that's quite like a technical one. How do you know when a piece is finished versus when you just avoid stopping? So knowing when to stop is a key thing because I personally find that with time you really get to be certain about when to stop. But let's say with the rolling pin method, you start shaping your piece. And then the key thing that I notice a lot when teaching is there is a tendency of people to do not respect the momentum of the clay. So you are stretching and opening your piece, and the piece is kind of bouncing back. That's to me a very clear sign that it's time to stop. And sometimes it's just like, oh, should I push a little bit more or not? My key tip for that is walk away from your piece a little bit, you know, see it from far. Or use, if you use the mirror to give you a feedback, to look at your piece and see. And sometimes you don't need to decide that at that very moment. You could very much just cover your piece well with plastic, come back next day, next week, whenever that might be, and then you decide if that piece is finished or not. Because in general, I find that people end up doing many more movements than what's actually necessary for the piece. And I don't think that's great. Like, I don't know, why would you be opening a piece to then just bring it close? Because when you bring it close, it's gonna fold again. So my way of working, and it's not that I haven't done too much opening, too much movement, moved the piece so much, or kept working on the piece for so long that the piece end up not working technically. uh, so yeah, always ask yourself, what is the time to stop your piece? But that comes with experience as well. The more time you spend really working on your style and your piece, you know when is the time to stop. Because as you see, like, you're like, oh, could I go more? Could, because sometimes we go and make our pieces with something in mind. So you know that you're going for that shape, and you kind of know that you need to work a little bit more with your piece. Whereas other times, you kind of like, let's see where the piece will take me. And when it's like that, you have the tendency of working the piece a little bit too much. And that comes with learning as well and time. And there's no right or wrong. Every, let's say, mistake that you make on your journey will take you somewhere. And that's a big part of learning, because I can tell you, hey, if you open your piece too much, or let's say you poke a little hole on your piece somehow, and you're like, oh, I'm going to join it. You definitely can, but it kind of is never really the same, because where there is that little hole, um, everything around it is already a bit thinner, and you can patch it. And some people do it really well, but I find that once you poke a hole in it, you're like, okay, next time I'll be more careful. If I feel that my clay is already a bit thin, and then you avoid poking that hole. So the try and error is a big part of this process when you're knowing where you go, and also what clay body you're working. It changes so much from clay body to clay body. Like, with a softer clay, with grogs, with paper clay, with a groggy clay. So everything is so different, and will depend where you're going with your piece. But practice and trust on your instincts. And if sometimes it collapses, it's okay. It's part of the process. So let's see what else we got here. Uh, what is something your technique taught you that has nothing to do with clay? Okay. I think something that clay has taught me, and now that I look back on my journey, that's really interesting, is this permission to be a beginner that keeps coming back. So when I started, I had absolutely no goal. I just happened to really touch clay on this. I went to visit this studio, and then I signed up for this workshop on the same day. And when I touched clay, I was like, oh wow. So I didn't have much knowledge, much awareness, or even like an idea of where I would like to go with my clay practice. I just kept going, and then the intention started coming, and then the desire of going somewhere started coming. So, yeah, I think the main thing that working with clay has taught me is to be a beginner again, and patience, of course, which I'm still learning, because letting the clay dry, letting the timing be right, coming back to work on your piece when the piece is ready to receive that work. So, learning how to be patient with my work has been a big learning curve, because so many times I opened the kiln too soon, pieces cracked, or many other things into the excitement of wanting to see the next stage of the piece. Um, so yeah, um, I see that Lorna is here. Do you want to send me any questions? There's anything that you want to ask? Please feel free to put your question, and I'll keep going through the other ones that I've got here. Um, let's see here. What is a creative habit that you had to unlearn being self taught? So, yeah, like I never really had the formal training. And it's not that I didn't try, because after 1 year of being on the ceramic path, I found out that there was a technical course in Australia, which is called TAFE. And I be a great opportunity. And because I was working with other people that have done the course, I was like, okay, maybe I do the TAFE. And they had a great facility with a kiln room and like so many things. And they didn't take me in. And I got quite frustrated at the time. I was like, oh, why not? Like, there was a selective process, and they were giving preference for Australian residents, which I was not at the time. And then I was like, you know what? I came to agreement with it. It's like maybe it's not meant to be. And what I've really needed to, let's say, unlearn on this process is that yes, there are techniques, they are really helpful, but to me personally, is a bit of fuck around and find out. Like even with my methods, like everything started kind of like, what if I do this? What if I just try that? And most of the time, I just do things and I'm like, okay, I'll remember that later. And I'm like, oh gosh, what was that I put on this recipe again? Or when I get the pieces out of the kiln, I look at both. I'm like, okay, which one was the test? Which one was the. Anyway, so it's this process of really trialing and learning with my mistakes that has got me where I am. And like everything that I always heard from the stuff that I've done from people that work with ceramics for a long time, because I'm really blessed to have a huge community of ceramicists around here. The region where I am, there are lots of potters, production potters, ceramic artists. So there is a network of people. Not that I'm really connected with the network these days, but back then it was really good to get inspiration, to talk with different people. And yeah, I think really just trying and error, because when I started with looking for the bloom that I really wanted, and I spoke with everyone, I heard that was impossible. That doesn't exist. You can't get that. Try all the blue glazes, see what you can get. And I'm like, nah, it must have a way. But that process from really asking and trialing, nearly giving up, and then picking up again took me like 3 years. And what happened with that process was like, nah, I got to the point that I was just working with unglazed pieces. So all my pieces were like all white or black or a mix of the reclaim. Because when I started, they didn't have that clay, the black clay. And then in this process that I'm learning, one of the clay brands launched a black clay. And that was like, whoa, because otherwise it was brown, white, or cream. And then I started making with this black clay, and the carving kind of started happening through there as well. And on my previous style, before I actually found my own voice, I got to work with black and white clay, and the black clay was twice as expensive as the white. And I was like, okay, I really need to reclaim all this black clay. And then happened that it's some mixed with the white. I got a gray. And then happened as I was reclaiming a big batch. I was like, oh, I'll see what happens. So I mixed the white with the black and I started wedging. And as I'm cutting this wedged piece, just to really look in the bubbles, if I was wedging properly, because I was learning how to wedge as well. I looked and I was like, oh wow, this pattern looks amazing. So like there was black and there was white and there was some gray. And then I was like, okay, there's something into that. So without really knowing that there was a full Japanese technique on mixing and layering different colors of clay to create patterns. So later on, I figured out that actually there's a full technique that I forgot the name now, but it's very much about creating patterns and mixing colors. So what happened with that? I was like, oh wow. So I started making some plates out of this reclaimed clay. And I started understanding a little bit how to work with that organic patterns of the two colors of clay. And the plates were looking awesome. Like you would get lost into the plates because they were very much like an abstract painting. There were all these forms and colors and shapes that were created. And that was a very organic process. Just me doing the day to day thing at the studio, reclaiming the clay. And then with that, I was like, okay, how can I transition that into my vases? Because back then I was developing the rolling pin method. So I made a bigger clump of clay and went to use this clay for my vase. And then what happened was, as I was shaping my piece, it was looking really nice on shape, but because I was like coming with the rib and sponging the outside, all that beauty that was in the piece got hidden because as I'm ribbing on the outside, I'm dragging out the clay. So instead of having a sharp visual and contrasting between the black, the white, the gray, it became all very blurry. So I was like, okay, let's see how I'm gonna go with that. And then as I started simply carving on the bottom to take that base, which is one of the steps of the rolling pin method anyway, I saw these beautiful patterns emerging. And I was like, whoa, I got you something here. So then I just with my knife, which is a little kitchen knife that I had, I kept carving and the piece was just coming to life so beautifully. Really, really cool. Are you there?
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you. I was working late today, so I was hoping I'd still be able to catch a little bit of the live.
Yes, we probably have a little bit still, and then I'm gonna put the whole recording live on that little call recordings, and then you can get everything.
Perfect.
And if you have any question, please just put on the chat, and then or just tell me what's your question, and then I can answer you.
Nice. Yeah, trying to think. I know I've sent you a lot of pictures of the rolling pin vases I've done, so I'm excited to eventually be able to watch videos doing that. Um I've just been exploring, kind of playing around. I have my first market this weekend, so very
Oh
excited
yeah.
for that. Yes. Just got a bunch of stuff out of the glaze kiln yesterday. But looking forward to when that's done, being able to like explore more with the rolling pin method and just like play around there. I think the biggest thing I'm having issues with the rolling pin method right
Yeah.
now is I think I'm building too tall. So then when I go to like shape the piece, I'm not able to round it out much or do much shape because it's too thin. So if you have any
Yes. So
advice for that.
how tall you are kind of stretching them up before you start shaping them?
So like the ones I've done so far, I've only done I think two or three so far. I'll start with like a 5 pound bit of clay.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten them up to like 7 or 8 inches, so pretty tall.
Do you have more or less what would be that in centimeters? Because my brain didn't quite yet get into inches. Like something like 40 centimeters high. Let me think. Because I don't like, I have more, if I'm not wrong, an inch is a 2.5 more or less centimeters, isn't it? Oh, you got muted somehow. Hold on. Is that me now?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, so it seems like 8 inches is like 20.3 centimeters.
Yeah, so what I would recommend you is like try to not go so high with the
Yeah.
pieces because that will really allow you to shape it with more freedom. And
Okay.
then with my pieces, when I'm making them like the bigger ones, what I do is I start with the rolling pin method, and then I add what I call a slab coil. And
Okay.
I'm gonna record this week a full lesson on the slab coil and how I shape different slab coils for different parts of the work.
Nice.
Because what I notice is I can nowadays go up to 20 something centimeters with one like cylinder of clay to start, but
Mhm.
I found that the evenness of the walls, you start fighting with it a little bit. So if
Mhm.
you go a little bit under that, say like up to 15 centimeters, not like just under 20 to start with, it will
Yeah.
be way easier to just later add a little slab coil or a big slab coil, and then you can even control better whichever shape you're going to go for. Let me show you. Let me get one here. Hold on.
Okay.
So for instance, uh, this one here is a piece that's made just with one. This one here is just with one piece of clay, one cylinder.
Okay.
And I wouldn't go much more than that. So if I wanted to grow this piece more, I would start adding slab coils, which I often make around like 10 centimeters, like say 6 inches or like 5 inches, something like that. Something like that. And with that, you can control the shape much, much better. And with this other one here, for
And your
instance,
slab coils are just like a thick piece of slab.
it's kind of a, I would say like if a slab and a coil had a baby, would
Okay.
be something along those lines
Yeah.
because I make kind of because I find the coils really versatile, but yet you have so much joining.
Yeah.
It
They're a
takes
pain.
so much time to join all those little bits, and I see that some people do add coils on top of coils and then go like joining them all together. But what I got to is like every time that you joining two pieces of clay is a chance of having a weak spot. So
Right.
with these coils, you really minimize that risk by joining just one line rather than so many joints. So
Okay.
with this one here, I start with the rolling pin method,
Hmm.
like here, and I really open it wide to get this shape. And then I add one or two, depending on what I make at the time, but often one big slab coil that will be this section.
Hmm.
And then on this top here is something very cool, which I called like a rainbow slab coil. So what
Okay.
I've learned with the time is like when I'm going for these sections that are wide, I just open a strip of clay, which is the slab coil, and
Hmm.
then I shape it. But with the top one, what I do is I open something that's kind of like a rainbow,
Okay.
and then when I put this external wider part of the rainbow into the vase, what happens is the underneath curve of the rainbow becomes the lip of the piece. So it's
Hmm.
super easy to shape this top of the vase with the rainbow. And it's
Yeah.
something that when I taught in person as well, people were like, wow, like how I didn't ever think about that. That's amazing. And it changes the whole process and makes it way easier. But try
Yeah.
that, try to make
Okay.
the basis with the rolling pin method, and then soon you have access to the video with this slab coil. And then you can also really play around with the shape that you're gonna create because the coils will allow you to do that, the slab coils. And the key thing that I want you to think in case you're gonna give it a go
Yeah.
before you see the video is always think that it's always easier to open a piece than to close. So if you
Mhm.
ever adding a slab coil and somehow you want to bring the piece to an internal finish, just be very mindful of that every time that you, every movement that you're doing, kind of guide the piece more in than out.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, if the pieces that I've seen, I think they are going really, really well. And the other thing that you can start practicing is every time that you opening your piece with the rolling pin method, make sure that what's going to limit you or what will tell you when to stop is the thickness of your wall. If you
Yeah.
see and look, okay, if I keep pushing here, it's definitely going to get too thin. That's a clue that's time to stop and add a coil if you, or a sled coil if you want to still come up with your piece.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. That's really good advice. I think I get excited because I'm like, oh, look how tall I'm getting. This is great. But then it's I get it off the rolling pin and I'm like, oh, well, there's really not much I can do from here. And then yeah, like I'll find that when I'm like evening the walls around, there's always like one really thin spot and then it's hard to save it from there. So I just try to
Yes.
shape it and make it like a I mean, I still don't mind the shape, but I like the shape
Yeah.
of your pieces where it's a little bit more open and I feel like more practical for a vase too.
Yes.
And
What I heard from florists around in
yeah,
relation to my vases and others is like I often leave the base quite heavy.
yeah,
So the vase really can hold a big arrangement if someone wants.
right.
And there's more or less the walls are pretty even. So the things that can help you if your walls are getting uneven are as soon as you flip upside down and you are kind of tapping or stretching your
Hmm.
clay alongside the rolling pin, be mindful to do movements that you kind of spinning the whole piece. Because
Okay.
sometimes if I get the rolling pin and I'm kind of just like that, squeezing it down, it's likely that around my thumbs, which has more strength, gonna get a thin spot. So what I do is like I squeeze a little bit and I flip, and then I squeeze and I flip and I squeeze. So you try to even out where your hand is touching that part of clay throughout. And then as you bring the whole rolling pin and you're gonna roll it around the table, the key thing is noticing already if there is a thinner spot or not. And what I do when I know that my piece has a little possible weak spot, a thin spot, I go outside of it with my nail and I just put a cross.
Oh,
So
okay.
then, yeah, a very gentle one, but I make a little mark. So every time that I'm stretching it out or lifting it up with the rib, I know that I need to be gentle there. And even if possible, I could drag a little bit of clay from other spots to try to save that little weak spot. So in that way, because it happened before that I was opening and stretching my clay, and just happened that if you go with the same pressure throughout, where is a little weak spot, you're
Hmm.
gonna push too much because it's
Yeah.
already super thin.
Yeah, no, that's a
So
good. I like the little X trick. That definitely makes sense. And I feel like now that I'm getting more for a feel for it naturally too, I feel like I know what to like look out for because I feel like a lot of it's also just like off of feeling and I'm getting more comfortable and kind of like learning as I go what to do, what not to do. So I'm excited just to keep experimenting and be able to like shape pieces more. I'm excited. I got that Mud Tools bowl. What is it?
oh
Bowl
yeah, the
tongue too.
bottom.
I'm excited to try that.
That's
And then I,
really good as well. You see, like that tool is really helpful because
yeah,
sometimes when we are using our fingers, I really recommend everyone starting with very minimal tools just
yeah,
to really get a feel for it. But the button really rounds it up a little bit and evens the walls on the inside really well. So you see, once you get familiar with it, it's like is a magic like tool.
yeah. I'm excited because I feel like lately I've like I accidentally will like gouge the piece with my like finger or like with the spoon I was using, kind of like cut it in certain places, and then it's harder to
Yes.
repair. So but it's been nice using my like fingers and hands and kind of getting a feel for it in the meantime. But I was like, oh well, this will be worth getting.
Yes.
trying this out as well. So yeah, I'm excited to practice more. I guess one other question I was curious about too, like is there a certain amount of clay that you typically start with for vases of your size? Like I usually been like doing like 4 or 5 pounds or whatever.
I don't, to be honest, like I don't even measure anything anymore. Like it all
Love that.
goes, I just cut it
Yeah,
and go. Before, when I started my practice, I was doing more like functional wear, and then
yeah,
you kind of do everything by the gram to
yeah.
get to the similar size. Now I kind of just have a flow, but with a bag of clay, if I'm not wrong, of 12 kilos, which is the average that we have here in Australia, I often go with around like three quarters, like one quarter to one third of the clay bag. So if you
Okay.
imagine a clay bag and you kind of get one quarter of it to work with, that would be the best. And one thing that I would recommend you to do, since you're already on the practice, try to make a very small piece
Yeah,
with
that's a
the
good idea.
technique. Just not too small as well, because if you make it too small, it's really hard to get your hands inside.
Mhm.
Something that's kind of around, say, 10 centimeters, more or less,
Okay.
12, just to have that very little, very easy one to practice. So in that one, you kind of try to get exactly what you had in mind. You visualize what kind of shape you're going to bring to life, and you try to perfect on that little one. Because then later, you bring that experience to the bigger one, and it makes it way easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with my pieces like these ones here, I think kind of this size.
Hmm.
That's a good size. My hand is quite a big hand for my size. So that's just enough that I can get my hand in there to work. It's smaller than that. It's too hard for me. I've made a few, but they are super hard. So aim to make a few like that to really get into the flow of the technique, and then you can really feel your walls if they are even or not. And then once you've done a few of that, you can really bring up. But yeah, like for something like that, this one here would be a third of a bag.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of practicing with smaller too. Obviously, I've gone right into the big ones, but the smaller
Yes.
too, then I would feel like would be nice to practice with like the carving methods as well. It's like a little
Did you get
easier to take on.
did you get some of the carving tools?
I already had some, so
Okay,
I've
perfect.
done, yeah, I have a few carving tools. I've done like some carving in the past. So I did like a bowl once, with and then I end up painting it with like blue underglaze back when I like followed you quite a while
Yeah,
ago. So it like it's not the same type of um obviously like color that you do, but it ended up looking similar. So
yeah,
I've done a carving of a whole bowl before. So
perfect.
but
So the
that's the
key.
extent of it.
Yeah, but that's it. So let's get to the key points with carving, since you got some and you're probably gonna get started.
Yeah.
Always when you're carving, the most important thing to keep in mind is the movement with your carving tool on the ends of the piece. So whatever
Okay.
shape your piece is, if it's a plate, if it's a vase, doesn't matter. Always gonna have an end. So when you're carving on these extremes, you're never going from the middle of the piece to the end.
Hmm.
Same with the bottom. You're never really gonna carve from here to here. What is the my recommended way is you go from the outside to the inside, and same here from the outside to the inside. Because what happens is if we carve from the inside to the outside, often we end up creating little stretch marks or little cracks in the
Yeah.
piece. But if you go from the outside to the inside, is a sharp cut. So that's the key thing with carving, to do not have a technical issue. And then from there is just aesthetic preference and all of that. But do a little trial of the carving, often in just a little bit of leftover clay,
Hmm.
just to get your movement. Because the other thing that I think is fundamental with carving and makes a huge difference is kind of going confident on the stroke. For
Yeah.
me, as an example, that's pretty easy to put on is like, I'm not a painter, but sometimes I get a canvas and I'm like, okay, let me do something. I get a near little panicking situation on my first few strokes, and they are super like uncertain,
They look
but
uncertain, yeah.
then yeah. So with carving, if you can do a few little runs on another little leftover clay, so then when you hit your piece, you go with like energy and confidence and flow. Because when you're carving, if you go a bit slow and a bit unsure, it really passes that with the markings that you create. So every time that you go, try to go with like some speed and some certainty, and if you carve through, that happened with me before and rarely, but still happens. It's okay. Take that as a learning curve because will happen. You can try to join it and to patch it. I had success a couple of times, but most of the times I was like, oh, you know what? I'll just take
Yeah.
this one as a learning curve and
It's
I'll
the
start it
learning, yeah. Yeah. No, that's good advice. Because I think when I had tried carving in the past, I definitely carved the opposite way, like to the rim, and have messed up some rims doing so. So I'm excited
again.
to practice some more too with carving because I love the way it looks, and especially on
It
your
looks so
pieces.
good.
Yeah.
One thing I find that's really good with carving to practice as well is making plates or platters
Yeah.
because they dry a bit faster, they are supportive, and they're really good to experiment. Even if you make maybe little like trinket trays or little side plates, something smaller as well, to really practice the different techniques and angles. Because what I do as well, one thing that people were really interested on the last workshop was when I'm carving, I often start, let's say, with this line here on the top,
Hmm.
and then I never leave. If you imagine the external surface of your piece before you start carving, I'm always so if I do one carving stroke, my next carving stroke, it kind of even gets a little bit of the stroke from before, a little bit of the carved area. So what I don't like to do is to do one stroke and leave a little gap of row piece and do another stroke. I think it doesn't look as sharp as beautiful. So every
Yeah.
time that you do one, on your next one, you kind of go a bit in and you get a little bit of that carved surface as well. In that way, it's really pretty. And the other thing that I try to do that I find that aesthetically makes the whole difference with carving is when I'm going for the second row or the second layer, I always aim to put the center of my tool. Let's say that your tool is like a C shape like that. The
Hmm.
center of the tool here, when I'm gonna carve, will be the joint of the two top carvings. So you have like two carvings that are merging here, and I'm gonna put the center of my tool right here in the middle. In that way, somehow creates a beautiful pattern. And the other opposite would be you do one carving and you do the other carving right underneath it. And in that way, it doesn't create such a nice visual because it becomes just one very elongated carving that somehow, yeah, I don't know. To me, that's an important aspect with the carving as well.
Yeah, very cool. It probably gives it much more of like a nice flow. Um, I'm excited to try that. I feel like I tonight I'm gonna go to the studio and probably I like the idea of trying it on like a platter or a plate. And as I've gotten into hand building, I've been doing a lot more of those pieces. So I feel like maybe tonight I'll try like a small rolling pin vase and then like a little platter I can practice carving on. I feel like that will be kind of a fun activity for tonight's practice.
Yes, I think it's really good sometimes to get some pieces that you have low expectations on them and you
Right.
really use them as like, okay, you're gonna be a guinea pig piece,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
I'm gonna try something new and see how I go because then you just in a bit of a easy energy and there's less pressure of getting that piece right and somehow end up that they finish often like super nice It's
Yeah,
like,
those are
oh,
always the best ones. Always your
yeah, it's
favorites.
like,
Yeah.
oh, that one came so nice. Like I wasn't even expecting to look that good.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's always how it goes.
and we have 5 more minutes. I'll ask me whatever you want to know.
I know I just jumped. I don't know if Lorna, if you have any questions. Sorry, I just jumped in and took
Ask
over.
me each one. I don't think I can. If you want to unmute, oh yes,
Yeah, can you hear me?
yes.
Hi, how are you? I didn't even know that I could chat, so I just was staring. So, Jordan, thanks for coming on and having the chat straight up. I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna.
Absolutely.
um. Yeah. I mean, I'm just really at the beginning of hand building, returning to clay. I did a couple of wheel throwing classes a few years ago when I lived in Australia. I know Byron Bay well.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's I lived down in Victoria near Torquay, but visited Byron many a times, so it's a
Oh,
beautiful
Byron
place.
is just beautiful, isn't it?
It is. It's stunning. I'm looking forward to getting back there at some point when I go over to visit friends. But yeah, so I've started just doing the pinch pots at the moment.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I'm gonna start doing some slabs and various different things and just experimenting and then maybe getting back on the wheel as well. Um, but with the pinch pots, yeah, it was just super fun. Like I enjoyed like I don't know, the organic like your handprints and thumbprints and then just as well, like I was just gonna follow the video and then as you said, the clay just takes on a life of its own and I think next minute one of them became a jug and I was like, oh okay, I wasn't planning that. And then the other one I was like quite happy with it, and then I was like, oh, I'll just try put a handle on. That'll be easy. And I guess my question is around I mean the handle I rolled out just like a piece of clay and I was like made like a random handle shape and I was like, oh, okay, that's a bit flimsy, it's not gonna hold up. So then I was like, oh, I'll just place it so that it hits the ground, that'll hold it up. Um,
Yeah.
and then I was just in a hurry to leave the studio and I was like, oh, I'll just cover it up and I'll come back to it. And I'll probably take the handle off and put on one that's a bit sturdier. But when I came back, it was pretty much leather hard. So I was like, oh, well, it'll just be a learning that the handle can just stay as is. Um, so two questions. Is there something I could have done when it was leather hard? Could I have put a handle on at that point or was it too late? Um, and then when I'm making a handle, like I put it on, it was soft clay, or should I have waited for the handle to be leather hard and then put it on?
So with that, always there are like a few things to consider. The size of the piece. So if you're making something that kind of has a heavy handle for some sort, you definitely need to leave the piece to be in a more of a leather hard stage to then put the handle. But what I
Okay.
noticed, and I'm talking about that on the rolling pin course, to me there are so many stages in between, like in between soft and leather hard, that are not considered. Like there is a kind of a, let's say, a soft leather hard, a leather hard, and a hard leather hard. So once you build more intimacy with your clay, you're gonna understand what works better with that body of clay. But the secret is, if you're going to join something that's a bit on the softer end, you don't need too much. Just a little bit of water will do for the join. But if you're joining something that's a bit thicker, then I would add more of a slip. Just have a little bit of a really soft clay, which is a slip, just clay and water. And then you use that as your glue, because that will really help those two parts to join well, and make sure that you score both ends of it. So those two things will make a difference. And what you can always do if you know that you want to do more work on your piece later is just cover it really well. Because if you cover your piece really well, it can stay for like weeks waiting for you.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. And then when you're joining the clay, should they be of a similar consistency when you're joining them? Like a similar dryness or wetness?
I prefer them to be in a similar dryness because I think one of the big things that often happen is because they are shrinking in a different time is more likely to crack. So if you have like the body, say, of a jug, and the body is a bit drier than the handle, they can dry uneven. So if you're gonna join a handle, I would even recommend you to just leave it under the plastic after you join for a while or for a day, and then you uncover to really allow that moisture to equalize a little bit. But you
Okay.
see that there are some people that sometimes attach a handle and they even pull the handle already
Mm.
attached to the piece and then they connect the other end. So you do have some room to move, but I prefer to play in a more conservative kind of joining than to go all in and have more chances of cracking because you already put so much work on the piece. You really want it to just be done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, sounds good. I mean, it, yeah, I was just messing around and
Yes.
yeah, and then I was like, oh, this doesn't work. And
Let's
that's
see how it
great because then
goes.
I'm like, okay, I clearly need to do something different.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, yeah, no, but yeah, that's probably about it. And yeah, the only other question is like I was happy with the consistency of the little cup pinch pot I did, and then the
Yeah.
jug I would say had different thicknesses and was maybe felt quite heavy and maybe too thick in parts. And
Yeah.
then when I got it back and it was leather hard, I just got a carving tool and I was just carving the walls to thin them out a little bit
Yeah.
again, and then I was passing that over with a wet sponge to smooth it out, but, I mean, I was just making that up, and then I was like, "Do you know what? It's fine, it's not perfect, I'm not gonna keep working the clay," because I was
Yeah.
like, "I don't really know what I'm doing." So but I was like, "If I just start carving stuff out, it will thin the walls."
Well, the carving is really a really good way of thinning the walls because you can really even see like, do I need to thin more here, more there? You just keep carving wherever you want to thin it a little bit. So that really works. And my tip with that is like whenever you build a piece, just go as well with your hands inside and outside and very
Mhm,
much close your eyes and just feel throughout your piece to really build that knowledge of looking and feeling and knowing how much clay you have in each section. So then you really know how much you can take out of it.
mhm,
And even sometimes, if you can, if the shape of the piece allows, put your hand like, let's say, your hand on the inside and support here as you're going with your carving tool, because
mm,
that's gonna give you a feedback. Anytime that you are a bit too thin, you're gonna feel on the inside, and that often happens more in the rim of the piece anyway. And in that way, you just get a feel for it and get familiar with carving. But in the beginning, having a bit more of uneven walls and all of that is super common. Common, you really exploring it, but you don't want to like it happens, but you want to avoid as much as possible carving through it. So really supporting on the inside can be helpful to know how much you're taking.
okay. Thank you so much. I'll, share the
Um,
pieces after the call, I'll put up the photos.
Yeah, please share. And like, even if sometimes you both understood what was the mistake or like what you should do different next time for that not to happen, please share it out so then we can develop and pull a thread of conversation and can help other people as well that may be doing the same thing or can read that in advance and say avoid doing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do so because I will for sure be making mistakes. That's
Oh,
the
I
fun of
still
it.
make. I made. I'm not sure if you saw. I didn't post yet on the chat because I did last night. I've been testing, I'm super excited about that. I'll just tell one little bit. I've been testing different ways of using color secrets for decoration to coming
Nice.
out of just using one color and mixing and using different colors on the same piece. And I made those jars that I was just like, oh, I'll make some jars because we just have like bubble water at home a lot. And I'm done
Mhm.
with serving it on the plastic tub. I'm like, oh, I want to like a jar. But I made as well the handles, and I did in a bit of a hurry, and one of the joints crack on both of them
Oh
on the bottom.
no.
So it happens,
It
like it
happens to everyone. Yeah, exactly. That's
happens
how
to
we learn
everyone.
though.
Exactly, it's part of the process and that timing of like, okay, should I then maybe give, if the piece got too dry, a bit too leather hard for it, should I then spray with a little bit of water, cover for a couple of days, and then bring the handle in? But it's always a learning curve, and sometimes the things that we're going to keep for us as well is like, oh, that's fine, I know what happened here, and
Right.
I get to keep this piece. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so very much for coming. And yeah, let me know as well with time and days of the week what works best as I'm figuring out which days to do like the lives so then more people can come in. And yeah, thank you so very much. And we'll probably talk through the community, and then we'll see each other in the next live.
Yeah, this was so fun. I'm glad I was able to join. This time is great for me, but
Yeah.
anytime works, I'll always try to make it. Thank you so much for your time, all of your advice. It's been really fun, and I can't wait to chat soon. And it was great to meet you, Lorna.
Yeah, great to chat to both of you. Thanks, Bianca. Thanks, Jordan.
My
Yeah, it's
pleasure.
really
Yeah.
great. Like it's great obviously having all the resources and everything, but it's nice to have the touch point to ask questions and yeah, have back and forth conversations. So thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, my
absolutely.
pleasure. Yeah, I think the community is great, but there is nothing that really beats the back and forth and like the talking is like one phone call sometimes is like 10 emails, right? So, yeah.
Exactly. Great. Well, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll
Bye.
talk
Yeah.
soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.